Man for Narunga.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. I rise today to support the motion before us, and particularly the suspension of standing orders to provide overarching priority of business today for such an important motion. The importance of the river and its health is a top priority for this state, for the simple reason that without a healthy river, our state and our nation cannot exist in the way that it does right now. I fully support the Premier's request to the Prime Minister for a meeting of the COAG Murray-Darling Basin First Ministers to consider all associated reports before us that are to guide all future decision-making on this critical issue. And I also endorse the South Australian Government's position that the Commonwealth, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, ACT and our state must continue to work together in a genuinely bipartisan way for there to be any hope of implementing the decisions required to ensure the sustainable, long-term health of our nation's biggest river system that does not belong to any one particular state. It serves all of us and must be maintained for it to continue to be the lifeblood it is for future generations across our country. As a person who has lived in a regional area all my life, and as has 4 generations of my family before me, I and my fellow regional South Australians can well attest to what it feels like to be treated in a second-class way by city-centric governments, particularly in the last 16 years before the Marshall Liberal government came to power, to have to continually fight to be heard, for policymakers to understand that the needs of people outside of the metropolitan area are just as important to the needs of people living in the more densely populated suburbs of Adelaide. And it appears that this was the issue the previous Labor government got a taste of previously. They got to experience how it feels to be a secondary consideration to be penalised for being small. The reaction of previous Minister Hunter was well publicised. He made headlines in 2016 over what was described as an expletive-riddled tirade aimed at other water ministers. And so with this issue, the metropolitan-centric Labor government learned a little bit about what it has been like for regional South Australians for so many years. Comparatively small SA is on the end of the Big River line, and the previous Labor ministry got a taste of what it can be like to be treated in such a secondary manner by the bigger states around the table, arguing that their needs are greater than ours. It is well publicised how the Labor Party handled this situation, cursing, name-calling, storming out and walking away from the table. Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, there is no doubt this issue is challenging for all and that frustrations are understandable. But the Marshall Liberal government, including my respected colleague, the Honourable David Spears, Minister for the Environment and Water, well understands that such anger is useless to the cause. Walking away from the table offers nothing. It has been made clear under these actions by Labor we were never going to get the 450 gigalitres. In fact, as has been clearly stated throughout today's proceedings, South Australia only received 1 measly gigalitre of water. That 1 measly gigalitre didn't even come from New South Wales or Victoria, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. So while those opposite were replete with slogans, fake fights and other bravado, they delivered very little for South Australia. Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, I would argue that's consistent with their entire term in government, over-promising and severely under-delivering for South Australians. Only a year ago, last February, the whole process was unravelling, with South Australian Labor Minister Hunter publicly stating he was prepared to launch High Court action over the issue. And New South Wales and Victoria were both threatening to walk away from the Basin plan altogether. Imagine that, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. If all parties had walked away from the negotiating table due to the notoriously short fuse that the previous minister possessed, combined with his absolute unwillingness to pragmatically negotiate a better deal for South Australia. All bets would have been off, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. The states upriver would have been taking all the water they desired, and we'd have been even further away from the 450 gigalitres that we are now, that much closer to getting, thanks to Minister Spears. It is imperative that we not only stay at the negotiating table, but we lead discussions on finding a solution. This is a critical topic, perhaps the most important topic that might come before Parliament of this term, and sitting on the sidelines doing nothing is simply not an option. The only option is forging a path of open, transparent, mature dialogue of negotiation based on mutual respect and knowledge that all jurisdiction ministers want the same thing: a healthy river that delivers critical human water needs and also protects our unique environments, birds and fish, the vegetation, the entire lot, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. I remind again that the Murray-Darling system takes in 23 rivers, supports more than 4 million people and stretches across South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. We can have no more unnecessary delays. Useless squabbling is damaging the river and actual action is now required in cooperation by everyone. We all saw the dead fish. We in this House must be one on this issue. Genuine partnerships are vital. Just as when in opposition, the Liberals in 2017 supported the Weatherall government's decision for a Royal Commission to get to the bottom of the allegations of water theft in New South Wales and the reports of serious compliance issues. Also, when in opposition, we supported all efforts from Premier Weatherall for a better basin plan, even though many may have judged him to have capitulated himself back in 2011 when he first fought for the return of 3,500 to 4,000 gigalitres, but eventually agreed to settle for a mere 2,750. Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, I put to you that that is a real capitulation, leaving thousands of gigalitres on the table that could have been flowing to South Australia. This motion makes a clear statement that this parliament stands behind the plan that was negotiated by previous federal and state Labor governments. The South Australian Government received the State Labor-instigated Royal Commissioner's report on 29 January 2019 and publicly released the report 2 days later. It is a pity public commentary centred around the Commissioner's views of negotiation efforts from Minister Spears in the last couple of months and not on the key findings and recommendations of the 746-page report about actions and decisions taken in years before Minister Spears was in office. It genuinely makes one wonder, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, if they have even taken the time to read the other pages of the report or only taken the opportunity to read 7 sentences from 1 page. The people of South Australia would also surely be interested in the Commissioner's views about the need to factor in ever-changing climate, recovering the remaining water we need through buybacks, using compulsory acquisition to deal with constraints to environmental water delivery, the recommendation to redo the Northern Basin Review to provide better recognition of Aboriginal people, to re-look at the role and performance of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, and finally to establish an independent audit function. And as stated by the Commissioner, very few of the recommendations in his report can be actioned by the South Australian Government in isolation, and I strongly support Premier Marshall's swift action in communicating with Prime Minister Morrison to request a meeting of the COAG Murray-Darling Basin First Ministers to consider not only the findings of the Royal Commission, but also for important review of the recently released Productivity Commission Murray-Darling Basin Plan 5-year assessment, the requirement under the Water Act of 2007. I commend the efforts of my colleague Minister Spears because his efforts have broken a deadlock and started the process of us actually receiving the 450 gigalitres of water that the water experts say our end of the river vitally needs. The December 2018 agreement is a historic one, struck between the Basin states and the Commonwealth, and it is significant that after such a long, costly, potentially environmentally and economically dangerous stalemate, Victoria and New South Wales have finally agreed to participate in the full range of water-saving projects that can deliver the 450 gigalitres. This means that SA is back at the table, but it is stressed that recovery of the final 450 gigalitres remains non-negotiable. And this is due to the responsible actions of this government and the leadership of Minister Spears on this issue. So looking ahead, the program criteria agreed at Ministerial Council in December provides a pathway by which 450 gigalitres can actually be recovered, not just talked about being recovered, but actually delivered to our state. We will now be watching the other states' progress on getting us this water, and the COAG meeting in the coming months will be exceedingly important. I'd like to commend this motion to the House, congratulate Minister Spears on terrific work that he's done getting all states back to the table and negotiating, thank all members on this side of the House for their potent submissions on this motion, and bemoan the fact that those opposite haven't saw fit to contribute to this motion and support the wonderful work that Minister Spears is doing. Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker.